The money fell to the ground like garbage, $100 bills flying through the dust in the torn shoes of a 7-year-old girl. But she didn't touch them. Instead, she did something nobody expected, something that broke a man who hadn't felt his legs in 10 years. What happened in that plaza in front of the cathedral wasn't magic. It wasn't luck. It was something so simple and so forgotten in this world of silver and gold, that when it happened, even those who believed in nothing fell to their knees. He offered $1 million. She offered a hug. And when her tiny arms touched the cold neck of that billionaire, his dead legs began to burn. But before I tell you how a paralyzed man walked for the first time in a decade, you need to know why that hug was different, and why the money he threw on the ground, he never picked up again. This happened just 3 weeks ago, and security cameras recorded every second. There are mornings that are born gray, as if the sky itself decided not to try. And that March morning, in Cathedral Plaza in downtown Chicago, the air smelled of humidity, exhaust from old buses, and burnt pretzels from a street vendor's cart. But there was something else in the atmosphere, something heavy, something people would feel in their bones in just a few minutes. It was 10:15 when the black armored SUV stopped in front of the stone steps of the old cathedral. It wasn't common to see that type of vehicle around there. The tinted windows reflected the pigeons that flew away, startled by the diesel engine noise. The rear door opened with an electronic click, and first descended a burly man in a dark suit and sunglasses. A bodyguard. His shoes shined so brightly they looked like mirrors. Then came the ramp. A metal ramp, unfolding with a mechanical hum, as if the SUV were a spaceship. And then he emerged. Marcus Blackwell, 58 years old. Silver hair slicked back with expensive gel, gray 3-piece Oxford suit, Swiss watch on his left wrist that cost more than a house in the suburbs, and seated in a wheelchair that didn't seem of this world. It wasn't an ordinary wheelchair. It was a masterpiece of German engineering. Black carbon fiber touch controls on the armrests, wheels with pneumatic suspension, $200,000 rolling on the pavement. But what caught the most attention wasn't the chair. It was his face. Marcus had sunken eyes surrounded by dark circles that no amount of money had been able to erase. His mouth formed a permanent line of contempt. It wasn't a sad face. It was a dead face, as if the soul inside had given up years ago and all that remained was a bitter shell parading through the world. The bodyguard pushed the chair toward one side of the plaza, under the shade of an old oak tree. Marcus raised a hand in annoyance. "Right here is fine, Raymond. Wait in the SUV. If I take more than 20 minutes, come find me." Raymond nodded wordlessly and walked away. Marcus was alone. Well, not completely alone. Around the plaza there was life. Street vendors with their hot dog and pretzel carts. Young mothers carrying their children by the hand toward the church. Elderly people sitting on iron benches, feeding pigeons with breadcrumbs. And laughter. Always laughter. Laughter of children running between the fountains. Marcus hated them. He hated that high-pitched, carefree sound. He hated seeing people walk without thinking about it, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He hated the cathedral stairs, climbing and climbing toward the carved wooden doors, because he would never climb them again. He hated God for letting him fall, and he hated above all the pity in others' eyes when they saw him pass by. That's why he chose this place for the meeting. Not because he liked it, but because it reminded him every second how much the universe had taken from him. 10 years. 10 years had passed since the accident. He was driving at night, returning from a business dinner in Lake Forest. He'd had whiskey, yes, but not enough to lose control. Or so he told himself. He was going 95 miles per hour on the expressway, talking on the phone, closing a real estate deal that would net him $3 million. And then the semi-truck. He didn't see it until the last second. The impact threw him against the steering wheel. The seatbelt saved his life, but his spinal column broke at the second lumbar vertebra. The doctor said he was lucky. Lucky to be alive, lucky to be able to move his arms, lucky to be able to breathe without assistance. But Marcus didn't feel lucky. He felt that God had punished him, and then left him alive just to watch him suffer. He spent fortunes, flew to Switzerland, to Germany, to Houston, hired the best neurosurgeons in the world, tried experimental therapies with stem cells, implanted electrodes, robotic exoskeletons. Nothing worked. The legs remained dead, cold, useless, and with each failure, his heart grew harder. Now, sitting under that tree, Marcus watched people pass with a mixture of envy and contempt. A man with a baseball cap sold colorful balloons. A couple in love kissed by the fountain. A group of tourists took photos in front of the church. And then he saw her, a little girl, small, maybe 7 years old, maybe younger. Black hair pulled back in two messy ponytails with faded pink ribbons. Flowered dress that once was white but now was gray from dust and washings. Plastic sandals with a broken strap, tied with string. In her hands she carried a bouquet of flowers. Not fresh flowers from a florist. Wild flowers. Daisies and field carnations, tied with a rubber band. The girl walked between the cafe tables, offering the flowers with a huge smile. Some bought. Most ignored. And then, as if pulled by an invisible magnet, the girl turned and saw Marcus. Her eyes lit up. She began walking toward him. Marcus felt a stab of irritation. He knew that look. It was the look of those who begged, of those who smelled wealth from a distance like stray dogs smelling meat. No, 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 he muttered to himself, moving the chair slightly backward. But the girl kept advancing. Her sandals made a soft sound against the stones. Flip, flip, flip. She stopped in front of him. Her small shadow barely covered one of the wheelchair wheels. "Good morning, sir," she said in a clear voice without fear. "Would you buy a flower?" Marcus didn't respond. He looked her up and down with narrowed eyes. The girl had scraped knees, dirty nails. But her smile was radiant. As if she had no idea how poor she was. As if she didn't know the world was a cruel place. "Are you deaf, girl?" said Marcus with a cold voice. "I'm not interested in your flowers." The girl blinked but didn't move. "They're for my grandma. She's sick. If I sell them all, I can buy her medicine." Marcus let out a dry laugh, a laugh without humor. "What a touching story. Did other street kids teach you that? Or did your mom tell you what to say so people would give you money?" The girl frowned. "My mom's not here, and my grandma is sick. It's the truth." Marcus leaned forward in the chair, resting his elbows on the armrests. His face was now closer to the girl's. She didn't step back. "Look, little one," he said mockingly. "I can buy that entire flower shop if I want. I can buy 100 flower shops. Do you know how much money I have? Of course you don't. People like you don't understand big numbers." Some people began to turn. An elderly lady walking nearby stopped, frowning when she heard Marcus's tone. The girl lowered her gaze to the flowers in her hands. One of the daisies was wilting. "I don't want you to give me anything, sir. I just want to sell a flower." Marcus laughed again, louder. The laugh sounded hollow, like coming from an empty cave. "Sell? And what would you give me in return, huh? A dead flower? A piece of trash you pulled from some vacant lot?" Marcus's voice rose in volume. More heads turned. A group of tourists stopped taking photos. The balloon man approached curiously. "But I'll tell you something, girl." Marcus continued, his voice now full of venom. "Since you talk so much about your sick grandma and about God, if God is so good, if he exists and cares about you, why is your grandma sick? Why are you on the street selling flowers instead of being in school?" The girl didn't respond. Her eyes moistened, but she didn't cry. "And me?" Marcus hit the armrests of his chair hard. "Look at me. I've been in this damn chair for 10 years. 10 years without being able to feel my legs. I spent millions on doctors, the best in the world, and nothing worked." The silence in the plaza was total now. Even the pigeons stopped moving. Marcus took out his black leather wallet from the inside pocket of his jacket. He opened it roughly and pulled out a stack of bills. $100 bills. New. Crisp. He threw them on the ground at the girl's feet. The bills fell like dry leaves. Some flew a little with the breeze before settling on the stones. "There you go," said Marcus with contempt. "More money than you've seen in your life. If your God is so powerful, if he really hears you, then do something for me." He leaned even further forward, his face inches from the girl's. "Make me walk." The girl blinked. "I'll give you $1 million, shouted Marcus, his voice echoing against the cathedral walls. "If you make me walk right now, here, in front of everyone." The crowd gasped. Someone pulled out their phone to record. The bodyguard Raymond emerged from the SUV, alarmed by the shouting, but stayed at a distance. Marcus pointed at the money on the ground. "You see it? There's $5,000 there. But if you really have a connection with that God you talk about, if you can really do something, I'll give you $1 million. Now, I'll sign the check right here." The girl looked at the money, then looked at Marcus, then looked at the flowers in her hands, and then she said something nobody expected. "Money won't heal you, sir." Marcus froze. "What did you say?" The girl raised her eyes, large and dark, locked onto his. "You don't need new legs. You need to melt the ice in your heart." The entire plaza held its breath. Marcus felt as if he'd been slapped. His mouth opened to respond, but no words came out. The girl took a step forward. She dropped the flowers on the ground next to the money, and without asking permission, without warning, without fear, she lunged forward and wrapped her thin little arms around Marcus's neck. She hugged him. Marcus froze. Not because of the legs. The legs were already dead. He froze because of something much deeper, something he hadn't felt in years. The girl's hug. Her arms were so thin he could feel the bones of her elbows pressing gently against his neck. She smelled of earth, of wildflowers, of cheap soap, and of something else, something he couldn't identify, something clean, pure. "Let go of me," shouted Marcus, trying to push her away. "Let go, you dirty girl." But his hands didn't obey correctly. They remained suspended in the air, trembling, inches from the girl's shoulders, as if an invisible force prevented him from touching her. The girl said nothing. She just squeezed tighter, her cheek against his cheek, her warm breath against his ear. And then Marcus felt it. A warmth. It wasn't a normal warmth. It wasn't like the midday sun or a winter blanket. It was a warmth that came from within. A warmth that started in his chest, right in the center of his sternum, and began to expand. Like warm liquid spilling. Marcus stopped struggling. His hands fell to his sides. His mouth opened slightly. What are you doing to me?" he whispered in a hoarse voice. The girl didn't respond, but Marcus could feel her heart beating, fast, strong, like a little bird's, and somehow his own heart began to beat at the same rhythm. Boom, boom, boom. The warmth descended down his spine. Marcus felt a shiver, but not from cold, from something electric, like thousands of tiny needles pricking his back from the inside. Going down, 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 and then it reached his legs. Marcus gasped. First it was in his thighs. A tingling. Light. Almost imperceptible. Then stronger, like when a leg falls asleep and starts to wake up. But more intense. Much more intense. "No. It can't be," murmured Marcus, eyes wide open. The tingling turned into burning. It wasn't painful. It was alive. It was as if something inside his legs that had been frozen for 10 years suddenly began to melt. Marcus could feel the warmth going down through his knees, through his calves, to his ankles, to his toes. "My legs!" shouted Marcus. "My legs are burning!" The crowd that had gathered around began to murmur. Some came closer. Others stepped back, frightened. An old woman crossed herself 3 times. The girl finally separated from the hug. She took 2 steps back with her hands clasped in front of her chest and smiled. A small smile. calm, as if she knew exactly what was happening. Marcus looked at her with terror and confusion. "What did you do to me?" he asked with a trembling voice. "What the hell did you do to me?" "I didn't do anything, sir," said the girl softly. "You just needed to remember." "Remember? Remember what?" The girl pointed to her own chest, right over her heart. "That in here there's still something warm. It was just hidden under the ice." Marcus felt his heart beating so hard he thought it would burst out of his chest. His legs kept burning. The warmth was so intense he began to sweat. Thick drops running down his forehead, down his temples. He looked down. His legs. The same legs he hadn't felt in 10 years. The same legs doctors said would never move again. There they were, wrapped in gray wool pants. The shiny Italian shoes, motionless on the wheelchair footrests. But now he could feel them. Dear God, he could feel them. He raised one hand, slowly, as if afraid to break the spell. He lowered it toward his right knee. He touched it, and for the first time in a decade, he felt his own hand touching his own leg. A sob escaped from his throat. "No, this can't be real," he whispered. "This can't be real." "Try it," said the girl. "Try it, sir." Marcus looked at her. She nodded, still smiling. The crowd fell silent. Even the cars on the street seemed to stop. The wind stopped blowing. The pigeons stopped cooing. Everyone waited. Marcus put both hands on the wheelchair armrests. His knuckles turned white from the force with which he gripped them. He took a deep breath. Once, twice, 3 times. And then he pushed. At first, nothing happened. His body lifted barely a few inches and fell back onto the seat. The dead weight of his legs pulled him down. But then something changed. He felt a muscle contract. In his right thigh, barely a tremor, but he felt it. "My God," he whispered. "My God." He pushed again. Harder. With everything he had, the muscles in his arms tensed, the veins in his neck stood out, his face turned red. And then his rear lifted from the seat. The crowd gasped in unison. Marcus was standing. Well, almost. He was leaning forward, supporting all his weight on his arms, his legs barely holding some weight. Trembling. Weak. But there. "He's standing!" someone shouted. "It's a miracle!" shouted another. Marcus was gasping. Sweat ran down his face. His legs trembled so much he thought they would collapse at any moment. But he didn't fall. He raised his gaze toward the girl. She was still there, 10 feet away, with her hands clasped, watching him with those huge, calm eyes. "How?" Marcus could barely speak. "How is this possible?" "Love is possible, sir," said the girl. "It always was." And then she turned around and began walking toward the cathedral stairs. "Wait!" shouted Marcus. He tried to take a step. His right leg moved, just a few inches, dragging on the pavement, but it moved. He fell. His knees hit the ground with a dull sound. Pain exploded in his kneecaps, but it was a glorious pain. A pain that meant he could feel. People ran toward him, trying to help. "No!" shouted Marcus, pushing them away with his hands. "Don't touch me!" He got on all fours. The $3,000 suit now covered in dust and dirt. Hands scraped against the stones, breathing like a wounded animal. And then he tried again. He raised one leg, the right one, the knee, the foot planted on the ground. He pushed. His whole body trembled. Muscles that hadn't worked in 10 years screamed in pain. But he stood up, wobbling, with arms extended seeking balance, but standing. The crowd burst into applause, into shouts, into tears. Some fell to their knees praying. Others recorded with their phones, hands shaking so much the images would come out blurry. Marcus took a step, just one, the right foot dragging forward, clumsy, like a baby learning to walk. Then another, with the left foot. Then another. He was walking. No, he wasn't walking. He was dragging, wobbling. but he was moving, forward, toward the girl. She had reached the first step of the cathedral. She stopped and turned to look at him. Marcus reached her. It took him 20 steps, each one an agony, each one a triumph. When he was finally in front of her, his legs gave way again. He fell. But this time, he didn't fall face first. He fell to his knees, directly in front of the girl. Now he was the one below. She was the one above. Marcus raised his eyes. Tears ran uncontrollably down his cheeks. All the arrogance, all the venom, all the bitterness had melted. What remained was a broken man, a man who had just received something he didn't deserve. "Who are you?" he asked with a broken voice. "Who are you?" The girl crouched down. She put a hand on Marcus's cheek. Her hand was so small it barely covered half his face. "I'm Emma," she said simply. "I'm just Emma." "No." Marcus shook his head. "You're not just anything. You saved me." Emma smiled. That smile that lit up everything around her. "I didn't save you, sir. You saved yourself when you let the warmth in." Marcus wanted to say something more. He wanted to explain. He wanted to understand. But the words wouldn't come out. Only sobs came out. Deep sobs that came from a place he thought was dead. He leaned forward and hugged the girl. Now he was the one hugging her, tightly, desperately, as if she were the only real thing in the world. "Thank you," he whispered between sobs. "Thank you. Thank you. Thank you." Emma returned the hug, little arms wrapping around the hunched back of that man who minutes before had humiliated her. And in that moment, under the gray sky of Cathedral Plaza, surrounded by a crowd of strangers who cried and prayed and recorded with their phones, something happened that no camera could capture. It wasn't a ray of light from heaven. It wasn't a voice from the clouds. It was something simpler and more powerful. It was the moment when a frozen heart finally melted. Several minutes passed before Marcus could speak again. When he finally separated from the hug, Emma took a step back. He remained kneeling, with his hands resting on the ground to keep from falling. "The million," said Marcus, his voice still trembling. "The $1 million. It's yours." Emma shook her head. "I don't want it." "What?" Marcus looked at her confused. But you said your grandma is sick, that you needed money for her medicine." "And it's true," said Emma. "But the money you give me has to come from your heart, not from a bet." Marcus fell silent. Then slowly a smile appeared on his face. A real smile. Not mocking, not contemptuous. A smile of amazement. "You're wiser than all the doctors I've known." Emma shrugged. "My grandma says God doesn't live in big churches. He lives in little hearts." Marcus laughed, a soft laugh, wet with tears. "Your grandma is very smart. I'd like to meet her." "You can come visit us if you want," said Emma. "We live nearby. In the Riverside neighborhood, yellow house with blue door. There are always flowers in the window." Marcus nodded, engraving every word in his memory. The bodyguard Raymond finally approached, his face pale with shock. "Mr. Blackwell, I don't know what to say. Are you okay? Do you need me to call a doctor?" Marcus looked at him and laughed again. "Raymond, I just walked for the first time in 10 years and you're asking if I need a doctor." Raymond blinked, not knowing what to answer. "Help me stand up," ordered Marcus. Raymond took him by the arm and helped him stand. Marcus wobbled but remained firm. His legs were still trembling, but they responded. They responded. He turned toward the crowd. There were at least 50 people around. All looked at him as if he were a ghost, or a saint, or something in between. "You," said Marcus, his voice hoarse but firm. "You were witnesses. All of you saw what happened here." Several heads nodded. The phones kept recording. "I was a bitter man," continued Marcus. "A man who blamed God, the world, everyone, for my suffering. But this girl, he pointed at Emma, taught me something no doctor could teach me. He paused, trying to find the right words. She taught me that the real miracle isn't walking. The real miracle is remembering how to love. And before I tell you what happened next, if this story is touching your heart, if you're feeling something special, do me a favor. Give this video a like. That way YouTube will know that stories like this, stories of hope and true love, are what we need to see more of. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, share it. A hug can change a life. This story proves it. Now then, what happened next will leave you speechless. The crowd fell silent. Some wiped away tears. An elderly lady approached and put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "God bless you, son," she said with a soft voice. "God bless you, and this little angel." Marcus looked at Emma. She had crouched down to pick up the flowers she had dropped. The daisies were crushed. The carnations wilted, but she held them as if they were the most beautiful flowers in the world. "Emma," called Marcus. She looked up. "Yes, sir?" "I want to give you something. Not the million. Something better." The girl tilted her head, curious. Marcus took a deep breath. "I want to help your grandma. I want to pay for all her treatments, her medicines, whatever she needs. And I want you to go to school. A good school, with new uniforms and books and can I still sell flowers?" interrupted Emma. Marcus blinked. "What? No, you won't need to sell flowers anymore." Emma frowned. "But I like selling flowers. I like talking to people. I like seeing their smiles when I give them a pretty flower." Marcus was left speechless, then he laughed, a deep laugh from the stomach. "Okay," he said. "You can keep selling flowers, but only on weekends. During the week you go to school. Deal?" Emma smiled and extended her small hand. "Deal." Marcus shook her hand. Her hand disappeared completely inside his. But when they touched, Marcus felt that warmth again. Softer now, constant, like a small flame that would never go out. They stayed like that a moment, looking into each other's eyes. The billionaire and the poor girl. The man who had everything and had nothing. The girl who had nothing and had everything. And then Emma said, "You know what, sir?" "What, little one?" "You didn't need to walk to be happy. You just needed to stop running." Marcus felt those words hit him like a hammer in the chest. Stop running. He had spent 10 years trying to fix his legs, running from doctor to doctor, from country to country, searching for the cure, the solution, the external miracle, and he never stopped to search for the internal miracle. "You're right," he whispered. "Absolutely right." Emma picked up the money Marcus had thrown on the ground. The bills were dirty, some stepped on. She gathered them all and offered them to him. "Here, it's yours." Marcus shook his head. "No, keep it. Buy something nice for your grandma." Emma thought about it for a moment. Then she nodded and put the bills in the pocket of her dress. "I'm going to buy her a cake, one of those with strawberries on top. She loves them." "Perfect," said Marcus, smiling. Emma turned to leave. She walked a few steps but then stopped. She turned around. "Mr. Marcus." "Yes?" "Don't forget what you felt today. When the warmth went down your back, when your legs woke up, that feeling?" "What about it?" "That feeling is in you all the time. You just have to remember to look for it." And with those words, Emma walked away, her broken sandals making that soft sound against the stones, flip, 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 until she disappeared into the crowd. Marcus stood there on his feet, watching her leave. Raymond was by his side, still in shock. "Sir, what was that?" asked the bodyguard. "What just happened?" Marcus didn't respond immediately. He kept staring at the place where Emma had disappeared. Then he looked at his own legs, then his hands, then the gray sky. And he smiled. "What happened, Raymond?" he said finally. is that I just received the hardest blow of my life from a girl who weighs 60 pounds. Raymond frowned, confused. Marcus put a hand on his shoulder. Let's go. We have a lot to do. Where are we going, sir? First, said Marcus, looking at the empty wheelchair. We're going to donate that ridiculous $200,000 machine to a hospital. Someone needs it more than me. Raymond nodded, still processing everything. And after? Marcus took a deep breath. The air tasted different, cleaner, fresher. After, we're going to look for a yellow house with a blue door, in the Riverside neighborhood, with flowers in the window. What for, sir? Marcus began walking toward the SUV. Each step was still difficult. Each muscle protested. But he walked. Dear God, he walked. To keep a promise, he said without turning around, and to learn what it really means to live. The SUV moved slowly through the narrow streets of the Riverside neighborhood. It was a completely different world from what Marcus knew. Here there were no glass buildings, no perfectly manicured gardens. The houses were small, 1 or 2 stories, with unpainted concrete walls or painted in bright colors that were already peeling. Electrical wires hung in chaotic tangles between the posts. Children played soccer in the street with a deflated ball. Stray dogs slept in the shade of old cars parked on the sidewalks. The smell of freshly made tortillas mixed with sewage and garbage. Marcus looked out the window with new eyes. Before, if he had passed through a place like this, he would have felt contempt, or pity, or simply nothing. But now he saw something else. He saw life. There was a woman sweeping her entrance, singing an old song. There was an old man sitting in a plastic chair outside his house, playing chess with his neighbor. There was laughter coming from open windows. There was music. There were colors. There was something that his world of luxury and silence had lost long ago. Sir, said Raymond from the driver's seat, I'm not sure this is a safe area for... Raymond, interrupted Marcus softly. If I'm afraid of this place, then I haven't learned anything. Raymond closed his mouth and kept driving. 3 streets later, they found it. The yellow house with blue door. It was a small house. Maybe 500 square feet total. The yellow walls were faded by the sun and stained by rain. The blue door had peeling paint in the corners. But in the window, exactly as Emma had said, there were flowers. Clay pots with red geraniums, white daisies, pink carnations. Marcus got out of the SUV. For the first time in 10 years, he didn't need a ramp. He opened the door, put 1 foot on the ground, then the other, and stood up. His legs protested, but obeyed. Wait for me here, he told Raymond. He walked toward the house. Each step was still conscious, still required effort, but it was his effort, his movement, his miracle. He knocked on the blue door. 3 soft knocks. Silence. Then, sounds of shuffling steps. The door opened a few inches, held by a chain. Through the crack appeared an eye, an old eye, clouded with cataracts, but alert. Who is it? Asked a woman's voice, raspy, tired. Good morning, ma'am, said Marcus, removing his sunglasses. My name is Marcus Blackwell. I met your granddaughter this morning. Emma. She invited me to... The door closed. Marcus blinked, confused. Had she just closed the door in his face? He heard the sound of the chain being removed. The door opened completely. In front of him stood a woman of about 70 years, small, thin to the bone, with a flowered dress that was too big for her, hair completely white, pulled back in a messy bun. Deep wrinkles furrowed her face like rivers on a map. But her eyes had the same light as Emma's. You're the man from the wheelchair, said the old woman. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Marcus swallowed. I'm not in the wheelchair anymore, ma'am. The old woman looked him up and down. Her eyes stopped at his legs, then went back up to his face. So it seems, she said. Come in. She stepped aside. Marcus entered. The interior of the house was as small as it looked from outside. A living room that also served as a dining room. A 2-burner stove in a corner. An old refrigerator that hummed loudly, 2 wooden chairs around a wobbly table, and on the walls, photos. Many photos. Photos framed in cheap plastic frames. Photos without frames, stuck directly on the wall with tape. Black and white photos. Faded color photos. A family. Marcus approached to look at them. There was a photo of a young couple. The man with a mustache, dressed in a suit that looked new. The woman in a simple white dress, a bouquet of wildflowers in her hands. Both smiling. "My husband," said the old woman behind him. "Robert. He died 15 years ago. Heart attack. Worked 40 years in a shoe factory." Marcus kept looking at the photos. There was one of 2 little girls in identical dresses, sitting on a swing. "My daughters," continued the old woman. "Anna and Beth." Then a photo of one of those girls, now an adult, holding a baby wrapped in a pink blanket. Beth with Emma, the day she was born. Marcus turned toward the old woman. "Where is Emma's mother now?" The old woman walked to the table and sat with a sigh. She gestured for Marcus to sit across from her. "Dead," she said simply. "Beth died when Emma was 2 years old." Marcus felt as if he'd been kicked in the stomach. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." The old woman waved a hand. "There's nothing to be sorry about. Beth is in a better place. It was cancer, fast and cruel. Took her in 3 months. And Emma's father?" The old woman laughed, a bitter laugh. "The father? He left before Emma was born. When he found out Beth was pregnant, he disappeared. Coward." Marcus lowered his gaze. "And you've raised her alone since then." "Not alone," said the old woman. "God has been with me. And Emma isn't a burden, she's a blessing." Marcus raised his eyes. "But Emma said you're sick." The old woman touched her chest. "The heart. Heart failure. Doctors say I need expensive medicines, treatments I can't afford." "And what do you do?" The old woman shrugged. "I live each day as if it were the last, because maybe it is. And I make sure Emma knows how much I love her. That's all that matters." Marcus felt a lump in his throat. You're not afraid, are you?" The old woman smiled, a soft, serene smile. "Afraid of dying? No. I'm afraid of leaving Emma alone. But God hasn't failed me so far. I don't think he'll start now." At that moment, the door burst open. Emma came running in with a plastic bag in her hands. Grandma, look what I bought." She stopped short when she saw Marcus. "Mr. Marcus, you came." Marcus smiled. "I told you I would." Emma ran to her grandma and pulled a box from the bag. A white box with a plastic window. "I bought the cake, the one with strawberries you like." The grandma opened the box. Inside was a small round cake, covered in white cream and decorated with 5 shiny strawberries. "It's beautiful, my love," said the old woman, eyes moistening. Emma turned toward Marcus. "Would you like a piece, Mr. Marcus?" Marcus was about to say no, that he had just arrived, that he didn't want to intrude. But something stopped him. He looked at the girl, then at the old woman, then at the small cake that probably cost all the bills he had thrown on the ground. "I'd love one," he said softly. Emma's face lit up like the sun. They sat at the small wobbly table, the 3 of them. Emma cut the cake with a plastic knife, her tongue sticking out in concentration. The pieces weren't equal, but they were made with love. They ate in silence for a few moments. The cake was simple, store-bought. But it was the best cake Marcus had tasted in years, because it wasn't just cake. It was love. It was family. It was home, things that all his money had never been able to buy. When they finished, Emma wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "Mr. Marcus?" "Yes, Emma. Are you going to be our friend?" Marcus felt his throat tighten. "If you'll have me, I'd be honored to be your friend." Emma smiled and extended her pinky finger. Pinky promise. Marcus hadn't done a pinky promise since he was a child. He couldn't even remember the last time, but he wrapped his large pinky around her tiny one. Pinky promise. The old woman watched them with tears in her eyes. Tears of joy, tears of gratitude. Marcus spent the next 2 hours with them, talking, listening, learning. He learned that Emma's favorite subject was reading, but she didn't have many books. He learned that the old woman loved to cook but could barely afford ingredients. He learned that they had no television, so they spent evenings telling each other stories. He learned what it meant to be rich without money. When it was time to leave, Marcus stood at the door. Emma hugged his legs. "Come back soon, okay?" "I will," Marcus promised. "Tomorrow. And I'm bringing something with me." "What?" "It's a surprise." Emma bounced excitedly. Marcus looked at the old woman. "Ma'am, I meant what I said in the plaza. I want to help. With the medical bills. With everything." The old woman took his hand. "I know you do, son. And we're grateful. But remember." "Remember what?" She smiled. "The best things you can give us aren't the things money can buy. Emma needs a friend, a mentor. Someone who shows her the world is bigger than these streets. Can you give her that?" Marcus felt tears pricking his eyes. "Yes," he said. "Yes, I can. Then that's worth more than all the money in the world." Marcus walked back to the SUV with Raymond. His legs were tired, aching from the day's use. But it was a good ache, a living ache. As they drove away, Marcus looked back at the yellow house with the blue door, at the flowers in the window, at the place where he'd found something he didn't know he'd lost, his humanity. 2 weeks after the encounter in the plaza, Marcus Blackwell called a press conference. It wasn't common for a real estate magnate to call the media for anything other than announcing a new development or a multi-million-dollar merger. But this time, Marcus had requested something specific, that the conference be held in Cathedral Plaza, in the same place where the miracle had occurred. Everyone came. Reporters from major news outlets, photographers, cameramen, curious onlookers who had heard the rumors, and of course many of those who had been witnesses that gray March day. They had set up a small stage with a microphone, folding chairs for the press, but Marcus had requested something else, that they bring his old wheelchair, the $200,000 chair. Now it was there, empty, next to the stage, like a monument to what had been. At 11 o'clock in the morning sharp, Marcus arrived. But he didn't arrive in his armored SUV. He arrived walking. He came from the side street dressed differently than people remembered him. He wasn't wearing a 3-piece suit. He wore jeans, a white cotton shirt, and sneakers. He looked normal, human. And holding his hand, walking by his side in a new yellow dress and shiny school shoes, came Emma. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Cameras started flashing. Reporters pushed each other for a better view. Marcus climbed onto the stage. His steps were firmer than 2 weeks ago. He still limped slightly with his left leg, but he walked. Emma stayed to one side of the stage, next to her grandma, who had been specially invited. Marcus took the microphone. He took a deep breath. Silence fell over the plaza like a blanket. "Good morning," he began, his voice clear and strong. "Thank you for coming. I know many of you expect a business announcement, a new project, an investment. But that's not why I called you." He paused. He looked toward Emma. She smiled at him. "I called you because I need to tell you a story. My story. And I need the world to hear it. Because for 10 years I lived a lie. And it's time to tell the truth." The reporters leaned forward, pens and recorders ready. 10 years ago," continued Marcus, "I had a car accident that left me paralyzed from the waist down. Doctors told me I would never walk again. And for 10 years, I believed them." He touched his legs. "I spent millions of dollars looking for a cure. I traveled around the world. I consulted the best specialists. I tried experimental treatments, surgeries, therapies, everything. And nothing worked." His voice broke slightly. But the real problem wasn't my legs, the real problem was my heart. He pointed to his chest. I had become bitter, full of hate. I blamed God. I blamed the universe. I blamed everyone except myself. Because the truth I didn't want to accept, was that the accident was my fault. I was driving too fast. I'd been drinking. I was on the phone. I was putting my ambition and my money above my life. And I paid the price. A reporter raised her hand, but Marcus shook his head. Please let me finish. I'll answer questions later. The reporter lowered her hand. 2 weeks ago, continued Marcus, I came to this plaza to meet with a business partner. I was sitting in that wheelchair you see there, a luxury machine that cost me a fortune, a technological prison that reminded me every second that I was disabled. He approached the empty chair and put a hand on the back. And then she arrived. A 7-year-old girl, selling flowers to buy medicine for her grandma. And he paused for a long moment. I humiliated her. A murmur ran through the crowd. I yelled at her, I mocked her. I told her I could buy her entire flower shop and burn it if I wanted. And when she mentioned God, I challenged her. I offered her $1 million if she made me walk. I threw money on the ground like it was trash, in front of everyone, to humiliate her, to prove to her that God didn't exist, that faith was a lie, that nothing mattered. Marcus turned toward Emma. She was still smiling without a trace of resentment in her eyes. And you know what she did? She didn't pick up the money. She didn't cry. She didn't run. His voice rose, full of emotion. She hugged me. The silence was absolute. Not even the pigeons made noise. She hugged me with those thin little arms, and she told me I didn't need new legs, that I needed to melt the ice in my heart. Marcus touched his chest. And in that moment, I felt something, a warmth, a fire that went down my back, something that no doctor, no surgery, no therapy had achieved. My legs began to burn, and for the first time in 10 years, I felt them. Several people in the crowd began to cry. I don't know if it was a miracle in the religious sense, said Marcus. I don't know if it was God or the energy of the universe or simply something inside me that finally surrendered and stopped fighting. But I know this. That girl saved my life. She didn't save my legs. She saved my soul. He wiped away the tears that began to roll down his cheeks. And now I'm here 2 weeks later walking. Not perfectly. It still hurts. It's still hard. But I'm standing. I'm alive. Truly alive. For the first time in 10 years. He approached the microphone again. That's why I called you. Because I want to announce something. Something I've decided after much reflection. He pulled an envelope from his pocket. A thick, white envelope. I'm going to sell most of my properties, my companies, my investments, and with that money, I'm going to create the Emma Foundation. The crowd gasped. Cameras flashed non-stop. This foundation will have 3 goals, continued Marcus. First, provide free medical treatment to low-income children and elderly. Second, give full school scholarships to children in poverty. And third, create community spaces where families can gather, share, and remember what really matters in life. He raised the envelope. Here is the check for the first $50 million, and this is just the beginning. I plan to donate 80% of my fortune in the next 5 years. The reporters exploded with questions, all shouting at the same time. Mr. Blackwell, is it true you'll sell Blackwell Tower downtown? Mr. Blackwell, do your business partners agree with this? Mr. Blackwell, what do doctors say about your recovery? Marcus raised his hands, asking for silence. I'll answer questions in a moment, but first, there's someone else I want you to meet. He gestured to Emma. She climbed onto the stage, shy for the first time. Marcus lifted her in his arms. His legs trembled slightly from the weight, but held, and put her in front of the microphone. This is Emma, said Marcus. The bravest, wisest, and kindest girl I've ever known, and I want the world to know her name, because she taught me something we all need to learn. He lowered Emma and knelt beside her, looking into her eyes. "What do you want to tell people, Emma?" The girl looked at the crowd. There were hundreds of eyes watching her, cameras, microphones, but she wasn't scared. In a clear voice, she said, "Money can't buy warmth, but love gives it for free." The entire plaza fell silent, and then someone began to clap, then another, and another, until the whole plaza was thunder with applause. People crying, people hugging, strangers holding hands. Marcus hugged Emma. Then her grandma approached, crying with her hands over her face. He hugged her too. "Thank you," whispered Marcus in the old woman's ear. "Thank you for raising an angel." The old woman shook her head. "I didn't raise an angel, sir. I just took care of what God lent me." Marcus laughed through tears. The next 30 minutes were beautiful chaos, reporters asking questions, Marcus responding with a brutal honesty he had never shown before. He talked about his arrogance, his greed, how he had lost touch with his own humanity. And then he did something nobody expected. He walked toward his empty wheelchair. He looked at it a long moment. Then he turned it toward the crowd. "This chair," he said, "represents everything that was wrong in my life. Excessive luxury, self-pity, bitterness. That's why right now I'm going to donate it to Chicago General Hospital, where someone who really needs it can use it." Applause again. And in its place, Marcus walked to one side of the stage. Raymond, his bodyguard, brought something covered with a white sheet. Marcus pulled the sheet. Underneath was a statue. It wasn't large, maybe 3 feet tall. It was a bronze figure of a little girl with flowers in her hands, looking up with a smile. The base had a plaque that read, "Emma, love isn't bought, it's given." The crowd burst into tears and applause again. "This statue," said Marcus, "will stay here, in this plaza, forever, to remind everyone who passes that no matter how much money you have, how much power, how much success, without love, you have nothing." Emma approached the statue. She touched the bronze with her little fingers, amazed. "Is that me?" she asked. "That's you," responded Marcus. "So we never forget what you did for me. For all of us." The girl smiled, that smile that could melt the thickest ice. A reporter raised his voice. "Mr. Blackwell, what do you say to skeptics who say this is a publicity stunt?" Marcus looked at him directly. "I tell them to come here, to touch my legs, to watch the videos recorded by witnesses, to talk to the doctors who treated me for 10 years and told me it was impossible I'd walk again, and then ask themselves, what's harder to believe? That a poor girl has more power than all the doctors in the world? Or that love is real?" The reporter didn't respond. Marcus stepped down from the stage. He took Emma's hand with one hand and her grandma's with the other. "One last thing," he said to the microphone. "For 10 years I lived asking why me? Why did this happen to me? Why did God punish me?" He looked at the sky. "Now I know the answer. It wasn't a punishment, it was preparation. God took away my legs so I could learn to walk with my heart." And with those words, Marcus Blackwell walked away from the stage, walking slowly but firmly, with Emma on his right and Grandma on his left. The cameras followed them. Reporters shouted more questions. But Marcus no longer listened. He only heard the beating of his own heart, and the sound of Emma's sandals against the stones. Flip, flip, flip. The most beautiful sound in the world. 6 months later. The Emma Foundation had opened its first community center in the Riverside neighborhood. It was a modest but beautiful building, painted bright yellow with blue doors, huge windows that let in the sun, and in every window pots with flowers. Inside there was a free medical clinic, a library with thousands of books, classrooms for art, music, and computer classes, a community kitchen where families could come eat together, and a garden in the backyard where children played and grandmas sat knitting under the shade of trees. It was a Friday afternoon. Marcus was in the garden, helping a group of children plant flowers. His hands were dirty with soil. His shirt had mud stains. And he couldn't have been happier. Emma came running from inside. Mr. Marcus, you have to see this." What's wrong, little one? Come, quick! Marcus wiped his hands on his pants and followed her inside. Emma led him to the medical clinic. Inside was Emma's grandma, sitting on an examination table with a doctor checking her. The doctor was young, with round glasses and a kind smile. "Mr. Blackwell," said the doctor, "I have excellent news. The results from the latest echocardiogram show that your grandmother's heart has improved significantly. The heart failure has stabilized. With the treatment we've been giving, she can live many more years." The grandma's eyes filled with tears. "Is it true, doctor? Really?" "Really, ma'am. Your heart is strong, stronger than we expected." Emma jumped with joy and hugged her grandma. Marcus felt his own heart expand in his chest, so full of happiness he thought it would explode. He approached the grandma and took her hand. "You see, ma'am," he said softly, "God hasn't failed you." The old woman squeezed his hand. "He never has, and he never will." That evening, after everyone left, Marcus stayed alone in the garden, sitting on a wooden bench looking at the stars. His legs still hurt at the end of the day. They probably always would, but it was a pain that reminded him he was alive, that he could feel. He heard footsteps behind him. It was Raymond, his bodyguard, though he wasn't really his bodyguard anymore. Now he was the Foundation's director of operations, and his friend. Sorry, Marcus," Raymond corrected himself. "Everything okay?" Marcus smiled. "Everything's perfect, Raymond. I was just thinking." "About what?" Marcus looked at the sky. "About how much time I wasted. 40 years of my life running after money, power, success. And I never stopped to ask, what for? What am I really building?" Raymond sat next to him. "But now you're doing it differently." "Now I'm doing it right," Marcus corrected. "Or at least I'm trying." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Marcus spoke again. "You know what the real irony is, Raymond?" "What?" "That I spent millions trying to fix my legs, and in the end all I needed was a $5 hug." Raymond laughed. "The hug didn't cost anything, boss. It was free." Marcus nodded. "Exactly. That's the lesson. Everything that really matters in life is free. Love, kindness, compassion, forgiveness. You can't buy it. You can only give it. And when you give it, you receive it multiplied." Raymond looked at him with admiration. "You've changed a lot, boss." Marcus shook his head. "I didn't change. I just remembered. I remembered who I was before money turned me into a monster, and a 7-year-old girl was the one who reminded me." At that moment, Emma came running out of the building. She had a drawing in her hands. "Mr. Marcus, I made you a drawing." She held it up for him to see. It was a drawing made with crayons. It showed 2 figures, one big and one small, holding hands, with a bright yellow sun above and colorful flowers around. "It's you and me," explained Emma, walking together. Marcus felt a lump in his throat. "It's the most beautiful drawing I've ever seen. Do you want to keep it? I want to frame it, and I want to hang it in my office, to see it every day." Emma clapped, excited. Marcus picked her up. His legs were strong enough now and sat her on his knees. "Emma, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Mr. Marcus." "That day in the plaza when you hugged me, did you know what was going to happen? Did you know I was going to be able to walk?" Emma tilted her head, thinking. "No," she said finally. "I didn't know if you were going to walk, but I knew you needed a hug." Marcus smiled. "And why?" "Because sad people always need hugs. My grandma taught me that." Marcus hugged her tight. "Your grandma is very wise." "And so are you," said Emma. "Now you're not sad anymore." "No," said Marcus. "I'm not sad anymore. I'm—" He searched for the right word. "Complete." Emma yawned. It was late. "I'll take you home," said Marcus. They walked together through the streets of the Riverside neighborhood. Marcus, Emma, and Raymond. The lights from houses shone warm in the night. Music could be heard coming from some window. Laughter, conversations, life. When they arrived at the yellow house with blue door, Grandma was waiting at the entrance. "You're late, troublemaker," she said with feigned severity. "I was drawing for Mr. Marcus," explained Emma. The grandma smiled. "Well, then you're forgiven. Go in and take a bath, it's bedtime." Emma hugged Marcus. "See you tomorrow, Mr. Marcus." "See you tomorrow, little one." The girl ran inside. Marcus stayed with Grandma at the door. "Ma'am," began Marcus, "I want to thank you." "Thank me for what?" "For raising Emma with so much love, for teaching her to see the world with hope, for not letting poverty steal her kindness." The old woman put a wrinkled hand on Marcus's cheek. "My son," she said softly. "I didn't teach that to Emma. She was born with it. Some children come into the world like that, with light inside. My job was just not to let the world put it out." Marcus nodded, eyes moist. "Well, you succeeded. Her light is so bright it saved my life." The old woman hugged him. It was a different hug from Emma's. It was a mother's hug. A hug that said, "I'm proud of you. You're doing the right thing." When they separated, Marcus turned to leave, but the old woman stopped him. "Marcus." He turned around. "Yes, ma'am. You also have light inside. You always did. It was just hidden, but now it shines, and it's going to keep shining. Don't forget that." Marcus smiled, a smile full of peace. "I won't forget. I promise." He walked back to the SUV with Raymond, his steps firm, sure, without pain. As they drove away through the streets barely lit by old streetlights, Marcus looked out the window, and he thought about everything he had gained by losing everything. He had lost his arrogance, his bitterness, his loneliness, and he had gained a family, a purpose, a heart that truly beat. He touched his chest. He could still feel that warmth, that fire Emma had ignited with her hug. And he knew it would never go out, because true love doesn't go out. It only grows, and burns, and warms everyone who comes close. The story of Marcus Blackwell and Emma went viral. The videos recorded in the plaza had millions of views. Newspapers wrote articles. TV shows made specials. Some said it was a miracle from God. Others said it was a psychosomatic effect. Doctors debated. Religious people preached. Skeptics doubted. But for Marcus, it didn't matter what word they used to describe it, because he knew the truth. It wasn't magic. It wasn't luck. It was love. Love has a power that science can't measure, that money can't buy, that time can't erase. Love can melt the thickest ice. It can ignite the smallest fire until it becomes a blaze. It can take a broken man and make him whole again. Marcus learned that from a 7-year-old girl who sold flowers in a plaza. And now, every day, he passes that love to others. Because that's what true love does. It isn't kept. It's shared. It doesn't run out. It multiplies. And when you give a hug with all your heart, you never know who you're going to save. Maybe someone in a wheelchair. Maybe someone with a broken heart. Maybe yourself. This story moved me deeply while writing it. And I know it touched your heart too, because you made it all the way here. Now I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from? Write it in the comments. I want to know if you're watching from the USA, Mexico, Spain, wherever you are. I want to greet you personally. And also tell me, what impacted you most about Marcus and Emma's story? Was it the moment of the hug? Was it when he walked for the first time? Or was it the lesson that love can't be bought? Write it below. Read other people's comments. Connect with this beautiful community. Because here we all share something. The belief that love is more powerful than anything. And if you want more stories like this, stories that remind you what really matters in life, subscribe and turn on the bell. Every week I bring a new story that will make you cry, reflect, and believe in everyday miracles. See you in the next story. Remember, money can't buy warmth, but love gives it for free. God bless you. See you soon.